Anisha. Let's start with multi-cloud first, and I'd like to ask this question to Mr. Nagarajan. What is VMware's cloud strategy? Why should customers choose VMware Cloud as against multiple public clouds, which is an option for them?
Hey Anisha, good evening everyone, and yeah, thanks for this opportunity. Multi-cloud today is a very interesting topic. A few years ago, people were still discussing whether you should do private cloud or a public cloud. Today, I think that debate no longer exists because customers realize that it's not either or, it's a combination of both, right? Both have its own advantages, and customers want the best of both worlds, right? So multiple clouds is given today, right?
Hmm.
Which is why VMware's strategy is to allow our customers to, build applications, run them, manage them, connect to these applications and protect them on any cloud, right? When we say any cloud, there is a lot of choice that we give to customers, and one may think, okay, why would somebody want to run VMware on a public cloud, right? Three reasons. One is it gives you a lot of freedom to choose which cloud you want to, right? Generally, organizations spend a lot of time and efforts to evaluate which public cloud you have to use. So we have simplified that by giving you freedom, saying, okay, pick any cloud of your choice, right? And you can run VMware on that particular cloud. That's number one. Number two is control, right? The biggest advantage of a private cloud is the enterprise level security, governance, compliance. Generally, these are better off in a private cloud as compared to a public cloud, right? So, how can you extend all of these to a public cloud as well? Right? That's the second topic, which is control. The third reason is to, uh, you know, accelerate the whole migration from an on-premises data centers to a public cloud. This is generally time consuming, it's cumbersome. We know organizations take months together and sometimes years to migrate their applications. So by using VMware Cloud on any cloud, they can accelerate their cloud journey in the fastest or the most optimized route. That's our cloud strategy, Anisha.
Right. Mr. Tumuluru, I want to come to you. Do you have a multi-cloud strategy, or are you aligned to a single public cloud platform? If it is multi-cloud, what are your reasons? Why are you going for it? And what has been the experience? Do you find it cumbersome? Is it easier? Tell us your experience.
Yeah, I guess I've been at Myntra for the last 1 year. Before that,
Mm.
it was the mothership at Flipkart. So between the two companies, I could say I've traveled, uh, taken the journey between our own private cloud. Flipkart had its own private cloud. We built all the way from the DC up through virtualization, platform services, the works, mimicking the public cloud. And here at Myntra, we are actually 100% on Azure. So that, for now, our strategy has been to invest. I think for various reasons, we are currently investing into the Azure public cloud. But that doesn't mean that we use all the services that are available wholesale. If you look at, there is a certain amount of things that are um, both from a cost perspective as well as from a feature parity standpoint might not be available in the public cloud. Some of the examples might be niche security concepts. I think Nagarajan sir was talking about that as well. There is more control available in the private cloud where you can build specific custom plugins, whether at the perimeter or on the VM. You could have more control and more customization. So while Myntra is on Azure, we still have a lot of bolt-on, application security layer and also an infrastructure security layer that is built in-house. So it is a combination strategy where you take some of the best elements of what you have, buy and build is the strategy. But I wouldn't say it's multi-cloud in the sense that you were talking about, where we
Mm.
probably go to multiple cloud vendors and get those. That is slightly cumbersome at this point in our journey, so we haven't looked at that yet.
Right. Kanav, what has been your experience? Are you on a single cloud, public, private, multi-cloud? And does the team have a uniform visibility of all the applications running across different clouds, if you do have, on a single
Yeah.
pane?
Yeah. So hi Anisha, first of all. And great to meet all of you guys. I think just like I think Sudheer also mentioned, so Urban Company is a much more younger company. I think we started about 5 years ago. At that time, we invested into AWS because that seemed like the right option, and it's actually proven even till now. I think relatively quite a good option. I think last year is when we started looking at probably looking at some of the offerings on Google or Azure, and some places they are actually better. But for the large part, I think we have kept it on a single cloud. I think there are pros and cons of both. Even in terms of if you look at cost wise, while there are some things, I think you can always have a leverage. I think if you are on multi, I think if you are basically if your applications are cloud agnostic, but then the bulk discount which you get is if everything is on the same cloud. So there's a nice little pro and con, I think trade-off there too. But that said, what I believe is I think it requires some level of platformization and intent to first solve it, and it actually leads to better solutions. For example, I think even the layer of infrastructure below. So whether using, I think what you're using, for example, for asynchronous communication, if you're using Kafka right now, are you using Kafka directly, or are you using some sort of a layer which you have created or something else out there which abstracts that out? That alone is huge. And I think the tricky part with cloud is that layer of abstraction is very tough to get it right. And I think that's where some solutions outside, where if you're starting your journey over there and you're using a layer to abstract out, you might not even need to use multi-cloud, but just that level of abstraction I think gives much better solutions, and obviously gives you the flexibility to move into different layer. In terms of observability, because we have one crowd, so for us it's fairly solid. But in terms of a bird eye view of all the services being on the same page for observability, I think that I think we solve for it fairly well, because everything is just there. I think all of our services, even though are on Dockers and on different containers, but I think they all speak the same language, so it's fairly easy to do that. Yeah.
Right. Mr. Dayal, what is your experience? Uh, when it comes to cloud computing, are you using multi-cloud?
Sure. So first of all, I think I'll echo. Sorry. First of all, actually very glad to be here on this panel. I'll also quickly introduce myself. I'm Yash. I work for Zivame. Zivame is the women's leading destination for women's intimate wear in India. And my role in Zivame is to drive the technology vision for the company and build like a highly personalized and scalable platform. I think Zivame is thankfully one of those new age companies where we've actually started on the public cloud. But I actually have, in fact, my alma mater was Myntra, so I can relate to some of the things that Sudheer was saying. So actually, I have seen the journey between a private DC to a public cloud. And in fact, a lot of my in my former life, I was completely on working with companies which had their own private cloud. And one of the things which I really like about the cloud is that it just gives a lot of it democratizes capabilities which were only available. So if you look at private clouds, then some of the bigger companies, they had these kind of capabilities that you could spawn servers using an API, etc. And public clouds actually democratize a lot of that information, and it's very easy, especially if you're a startup or a smaller company. It's a big disruption, I think. And I think again, I'll echo what Kanav has said, right? So if we I think one of the reasons why companies would want to go for multi-cloud strategy is because you build that abstraction. So if you start from the perspective that you want to be multi-cloud, then the system that you will architect, all of that will be actually agnostic of the platform. And that will eventually build better systems, and it will allow
Yes.
you, of course, you'll be able to switch from one cloud to the other, or balance of what percentage of your infrastructure you want on what particular cloud.
Right. But Mr.
And
Dayal, then how do you deal with the complexity of performance troubleshooting for an application when, multiple clouds are involved? There may be, some good points, but how do you then deal with some of the challenges that may come up, even of governance? I mean, governance for all your employees accessing multiple clouds, how do you set that?
Yeah, so I think there are some tools which can actually help you with this stuff. So there are some tools which can actually help build this app, which gives you some of this abstraction out of the box. So you can use that abstraction to actually launch servers across multiple clouds. In addition, but I think what you said is fair, right? So even if you look at overall software development, when you look at a monolithic application, where all your code is in a single application, debugging issues on that is a lot easier than if you compare to like a microservices based application, right? Now, but there are both pros and cons, right? There's the advantage of microservices, in spite of the difficulties in debugging and the difficulties um, uh, in handling multiple systems, uh, overshadows the simplicity of monolithic applications, and which is why people have moved on. So um, I think I think what I want to say is there's a transition. So I think earlier it was private data centers, then a lot of companies have moved to single cloud, and I think multi-cloud is probably the next logical step.
Right. I see Mr. Nagarajan is smiling. Could you tell us how VMware helps you to provide uniform visibility, governance, and operations across multiple public clouds? Should people want to move to that?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to acknowledge what Yash and Kanav said. You're right. I mean, this is, but you would want to stay with a single cloud. But interestingly, we are hearing customers say that multi-cloud, more than being a strategy, is ending up becoming a reality. In the sense that you would not even be aware, either because of shadow IT or some reason or the other. We see more and more companies ending up in multi-cloud rather than planning for adopting a multi-cloud strategy, right? Anyway, having said that, we understand that when you use multiple clouds, they all have different ways in which they cater to things. So security, governance, and all of these things will be very different. So while applications could be spread across on-premises private cloud or native public clouds, how do you automate the self-service provisioning? Like Yash said, right? If you want to bring up servers, how can you bring them up on Azure or AWS or even on-prem? So we have a self-service provisioning solution which lets customers to bring them up on any cloud of their choice. It also provides visibility to all the IT teams on which applications are running on which clouds. It has a consistent operations management framework, and it simplifies the whole operations. It gives them consistency across on-premises and public cloud deployments from a single console.
All right. Mr. Dayal, are you there? I wanted to bring you in on the point of observability, and how do you pinpoint the root cause of performance or availability problem for your app you're running on a public cloud?
So again, so most clouds. So there are actually two solutions there. Most clouds have their own observability platform or systems available, and there's a plethora of open source as well as paid systems that you can use. So if you are using any of the third party ones which are actually separated from the cloud, then it's very easy to have multiple clouds. So you can just set up your particular agents which are running on your servers, which are actually pushing data from multiple clouds to a central system, and with that you can actually work on your observability. And another very interesting thing which can happen if you're on multiple clouds is that sometimes people will also have an issue which is underlying on that particular cloud itself. And if you're on multiple clouds, that actually gives you a whole new perspective. So you can actually see that, okay, my application running on, so let's say you can say my application running on AWS does not have the issue, but my application running on application running on this other cloud actually has the issue. So you're able to, with the same code, you're able to quickly identify. On the other hand, if you were only on a single cloud, then you would actually spend a lot more to figure out these things. So those are there. So it's both pros and cons. But as Kanav mentioned, right? So it's not very straightforward to be on multiple clouds. So I think a lot of companies at this point continue to work on a single cloud and maybe just explore a little bit on the other clouds. In fact, I've talked to a lot of people. I think at least the majority use cases currently are people are predominantly on a single cloud and they're exploring a few services on some other clouds.
So, Mr. Tumuluru, would you like to come in, since yours is a single cloud, your own private cloud experiences, observability, in finding out the root problems? Is it easier or is it tougher? Because Yash just said that perhaps with multiple options, it'll be easier for you to find out where the problem lies. What's your experience like?
See, I think ultimately the problem, observability is a multi-pronged problem, right? One is you need to have the right monitoring and metrics that need to be emitted. Then you have logging, you need to have alerting. These are the trifecta to get visibility into an application. That's the application level. Then there is a infrastructure level troubleshooting also that you'll need to be able to do, where you have another set of tools. One of the things, if you look at how the cloud CNCF is evolving in the container space, that's an open standard that's bringing together standardization. I think containers themselves bring a lot of standardization in terms of how you log data, how you emit metrics, and so on. Then you can bolt on various plugins and with this Kubernetes movement, actually, all the public cloud vendors are building interfaces to the standard container-led specifications. So, for example, I could give you for provisioning. For example, we could use Terraform, which is a standardized infrastructure as code service that you can use. It's open source, and you can pretty much wrap custom tool sets in-house to get that to happen. Similarly, on the monitoring side, like I said, Prometheus would be a good example. So you can sort of stitch together all the standardizations that are coming up in the CNCF space to make this possible. Then it doesn't matter whether you are in a single cloud or a multi-cloud. You containerize all your stateless applications. You have all the stateful services in a centralized service like Amazon RDS or Cloud SQL services, and then you're set. I think it doesn't matter which cloud you're on. I think that's the way we think about here in Myntra.
All right. Mr. Nagarajan, Mr. Tumuluru has come up with easy solutions, but do you think observability is like old wine, monitoring in a new bottle? Is it that complicated?
Well, I think this is a fair question. Monitoring is a old technology. It's of course existing even today. Monitoring is all about checking whether things are working as expected, right? Observability definitely is not old wine. It is new wine in a new bottle, I would like to say. It's the ability to see everything, right? Like I think Yash was saying, right? When a request comes to a monolithic application, it's fairly easy to trace through what happened within that request, right? Because everything is self-contained in a monolithic application. But when a request comes to a microservice, that could result in a cascading chain of 10 other HTTP calls to various other services, right? So distributed tracing is one technology that allows the multiple applications to span servers. More importantly, the logs will be able to span not only multiple instances of a single service, but also need to be able to correlate the collaborative activity of multiple services, right? When service A calls service B and B in turn calls service C, you want to be able to correlate certain log data and statistics about that one particular request, right? So distributed tracing actually helps you to pinpoint where the failures occur and what is actually causing suboptimal performance for the application.
Right. Kanav, want to come to you and talk about security. How do you secure your apps? And do you depend on the cloud provider for tools to secure workloads? How does it work?
It's a combination of, I think, multiple things. Security, the way I look at it, is almost like an investment. You take a certain budget out and you say, "Okay, this is the type of lock which I want to get with that." Honestly speaking, it's not, I know it's not a very comforting answer, but that's basically what it is. It's an investment which you're paying against guarding whatever you want to do. We do a bunch of things. Since we are at AWS, we heavily use guard duty and cloud trails as services which are provided by the cloud itself. Apart from this, I think most of the other security things, most of the other things would be, independent of whichever cloud you are on. It would pretty much be, I think, related to your own application. For that, we are also live on HackerOne, which is the biggest bug bounty platform in the world. Probably has the best ethical hackers out there. That's we've seen decent uplift from that. Apart from this, we do a quarterly VAPT, which is I don't know full form, but it's like a proper audit of all of our security things, and we get a report and we work on it. We also have a dedicated team, which we believe should always work on investing in this. If there are a lot of startups right now, or folks who are in the startup, who are part of this audience, one thing which I would recommend is to try and do from day one is at least create make sure everything is under your own, all your production environment is in a very separate VPN, which is completely blocked. I think that's like the start and bare minimum for everything else which you want to achieve. That would be like, almost a 80-20 to start off with. And then the rest 20%, I think you have to do a lot more, fair bit amount. Yeah.
Mr. Tumuluru, was security one of the reasons for sticking to your own cloud, not going to a public cloud? What has been your experience, and how do you ensure security of your applications running on the cloud?
While I was heading security at Flipkart, we had a private cloud, so it was fairly easy to get the right amount of control within our private cloud. So yes, that statement is partially true. On the public cloud, things are exposed by default, so you'll need to have things exposed in the right VPC. For example, I was in AWS before I joined Flipkart, so I know that how AWS has evolved in terms of maturity of VPC. For example, S3 buckets that are only accessible from, there's an endpoint for S3 within the VPC. Those are things that you can probably set up that will set you up right. But these are a checklist of things that I think a startup coming in, AWS doesn't help you. Any cloud vendor, don't take the responsibility. I think yesterday I was talking with Mr. Nagarajan about this. None of the public cloud vendors take responsibility for securing your cloud. So it's entirely your responsibility. For example, if an S3 bucket is exposed, then I think there was a well-known case very recently, I forget what the company is, but there was a huge leak of data, and the company almost went under because of that. So there are accidents like these if you don't have the right skill set available and knowing the right levers to or configurations to tweak in the public cloud. In a private cloud, because you're doing the productization of how your cloud should look like, you could have a lot more control. But like Kanav said, I think security is a multi-layer cake, right? You need to secure your infrastructure, your VM infrastructure, your network. Then you go all the way up to the applications. So security needs to permeate all aspects. So for example, with Azure, you have the Azure Security Center, which gives you some basic information. It will tell you if a port is unintentionally open. There are other things like you shouldn't have your production host having outside access to the internet. So some basic things need to be done. But then security needs to be treated like, all the way through the SDLC, where every piece of code that's going in should go through a VAPT. Then you need to have a red team that's attacking it. Like Kanav said, we have partnered with HackerOne as well, where you get access to a big community of ethical hackers. So yeah, you'll need to do all of them. I think it's still not 100%. Security is never 100%. You always know there's something out there. So you just need to progressively get better.
Right. Mr. Nagarajan, why is there this impression that public clouds are unsafe? Mr. Tumuluru spoke about these incidents of hacking, and they don't get spoken about a lot because they get hushed up. But even drug companies that were developing the vaccine, the corona vaccine at a breakneck speed, they were exposed to hackers, theft of intellectual property, ransomware, and they put a lot of their things on the cloud. So when it comes to customer data, people get edgy when it comes to public cloud. Why is this impression that public cloud is not safe?
Yeah, so first of all, before I answer that question, you're right that there has been a huge increase in the security breaches, especially during the pandemic, some 500, 600% increase as compared to what it was before. These attacks are more sophisticated and organized today. There are organizations behind these cybercrime cartels. It's no longer dealing with just individuals. They are deploying custom malware, which is meant only for one organization, and it is never deployed again to another company. So there's no question of you using those signatures and trying to prevent that from happening again. Majority of the attacks are using evasion techniques. So unfortunately, like Sudheer said, it's not 100% malware, or the bad guys are always ahead of good guys, right? So in short, conventional security is not sufficient to address the threats that we have in the modern day infrastructure and applications. Having said that, coming to your question on public cloud, I would be absolutely incorrect if I say public clouds are unsafe, right? They are definitely safe, right? In fact, public clouds are a lot more secure. It's just that what organizations need to understand is it's not entirely the responsibility of the public cloud provider to keep it safe. It's a shared responsibility model, which a lot of companies don't understand, right? Like he was explaining, the public cloud providers take responsibility for a number of things to make sure that the infrastructure, the physical data centers, maybe up to the hypervisors and virtual machines, everything is kept secure, right? But what runs on top of that are your applications. How do you configure them varies between every organization, right? And the biggest challenge is who uses public clouds, right? In any organization, right? The people who use public clouds are not IT savvy. They are not security experts. They are all, in most of the companies, they're all developers, application platform folks, right? They don't understand, what is secure and what is not, right? So 95% of the breaches that happens on public cloud is because of misconfigurations. It's just that it shouldn't be configured in a particular way, and they end up configuring in a particular way, right? So it is very important, for companies to understand first that they have a role to play, and it's not entirely AWS or Azure's responsibility. And of course, use certain tools to, crawl the public cloud environment, understand how things are configured. There could be open ports, like you were saying, S3 buckets could be left open, for attackers to come in and things like that. So those vulnerabilities have to be fixed, right? That's the actual clarity. It's not that public clouds are unsafe.
Mr. Dayal, what's your view? What are you doing to work with your cloud partner to ensure that your security is tight?
Yeah. So I think I'll give a generic answer here. I think one is I think security is extremely critical for both private clouds as well as public clouds. And the notion that people have that private clouds are safer than public clouds, I think it is based on security by obscurity, and I think that's not a good paradigm to have. So the fact is that like if as what has been mentioned, if things are not configured properly, the private cloud can be as or more vulnerable than the public cloud as well. And the other thing is that security is as strong as the weakest link. So as what Sudheer mentioned, right? It's like the cake analogy, of to address all parts of the cake. And what I want to add there is it's also not a one-time thing. So security is like an ongoing process, and you need to have this holistic view about security. And this can, and it's not limited to even the infrastructure in the cloud. It's also limited. It also includes the email password which your employees have. So even the intranet security is actually very, very important. Uh, so I think the ideal approach for security is to take a holistic view, look at it deeply, and try to identify what are the weakest links, and actually start hardening them and keep like rinse and repeat, and eventually you will. And it's an ongoing thing. So as Sudheer mentioned, right, it's not, it never ends. So you have to just keep on it, and it's a cat and mouse game, right? So as more and more as the more systems become more secure, all the malicious users or hackers, they try to beat the system. So it's a continuous catch up.
And one small analogy I want to give to what Yash said, right? There's a misconception that private clouds are more safer and secure than public clouds. It's like saying your cash at home is always safer than
Safer.
cash at bank. How do you deal with that, right? And so yeah.
Right. Now, the hackers are always one step ahead, but that doesn't mean that you stop putting in your effort and you, like Mr. Dayal said, have to keep improvising on a regular basis. Now, I want to talk about, the cost. And one of the reasons people move to the cloud is because, on-prem, how much more infrastructure can you develop it? They look at the cost optimization as well. So kind of, when it comes to optimizing cost, do you think it'll work across multi-cloud platforms as well? Do you think it'll be, do you think spending on one platform will be lower or more cost effective as compared to spending on many? Have you considered some of those issues?
So once again, the 80-20 answer over there would be is for a lot of the companies. Of course, if you're at a certain scale, which is huge, then everything happens, right? Like you have to go to multi-cloud, all of those things. But for a large part, most of the cloud optimizations or cost optimizations, which you're paying for your infrastructure or your cloud, I think there's a lot of juice in what you currently are doing and how you're doing. I look at it, when I look at cost, I look at two ways to solve it, right? There is one thing which is decentralized, because not everyone is working on infrastructure, right? Developers have other jobs also. They are actually, doing e-commerce or actually flipping features, etc. They're each team is responsible for a certain microservice, etc. So one way is you kind of decentralize cost, right? You assign each sub team some sort of cost, you calculate it and then give them targets and solve it. And the other way is, are there any central efforts which you can do at the platform level, or your platform team or infrastructure team can do to actually really move the needle? In my experience, over a period of time, the platform initiatives really trump any sort of decentralization effort you will do, because most of the developers or most of the other sub teams will end up doing things their own way, or you can't trust them to actually control that, right? Now, if you want your platform team to be really empowered and effective, you have to solve for standardization, and a lot of the other things also start making sense, I think, when you do that. For example, as I said, very simple thing. I gave an example earlier. For example, right now Kafka, everyone wants to use Kafka, but tomorrow if there's another message broker, which is basically another type pub sub between different microservices or different services, our developers straight away using topics and nomenclature of Kafka, then it becomes really hard. But if you have a certain library which you have actually made, which we made, you can actually switch it immediately and you don't need to worry about it, right? Similarly, how your containers and how your servers are deployed, if that is fairly well platformized, for example, in UC, a developer, any microservice owner just needs to say what is the memory requirements and what is the memory requirement for the containers which they need to have, and everything else is abstracted out, which means is it gives us tremendous flexibility. What we did, one of the huge cost saving things which we did was move all of our server or application containers to Spot, which is huge. You actually immediately get 80% cost reduction, or 50 to 80%. And that is possible because that whole layer of our service and provisioning was completely abstracted out and it was platformized. So we could do it within a week. Similarly, I think what Mr. Natarajan was saying earlier, distributed retracing, right? Like it's a very, very tough problem to solve. But the way we have built all of our microservices, every microservice to service connection flows through this one layer which we have built. And the amazing part of this is we just had one developer come in for 1 week, solved it within this layer, and now we have distributed retracing across all of our microservices. So we can do that right now. It's not an unsolved problem.
Right.
So bunch of these type of things start to make a lot more sense, but
Hmm.
that can only happen if you platformize and standardize a lot of your infrastructure and how you do things. Then your platform team becomes really empowered to take a needle mover. I think our right now, I think I can tell it. Right now, our cost is our infrastructure cost is about 3% of our revenue, which is pretty good for a company at our scale. And we
Right.
see line of sight to actually go to 1.5 this year, and that's all because of these platform efforts. And we have already done the standardization before. So yeah.
Right. Mr. Nagarajan, does VMware have a role in optimizing the customer spend on cloud platforms?
Yeah, we do. So first of all, you can solve the problem only when you know you have a problem. There are a number of organizations who struggle with this, which is
Hmm.
visibility into what your costs are, right? Who is using what services, which groups, how many accounts. We know companies which have hundreds and thousands of AWS accounts or Microsoft accounts and so on and so forth. So the first problem is giving them visibility, right? That's the solution that we have, which
Hmm.
shows them who's using which services, and as a result of which, what is the cost that they're incurring. And then comes the question of recommendations on how do you optimize that, right? Generally, what happens is people are used to their provisioning on premises, so they will end up provisioning the same way on a public cloud. So if you wanted, let's say, 8 GB of RAM, you tend to take something like a 12 or 16 GB of RAM, but you may actually end up using 8 or lesser, right? So there will be a lot of over provisioning that would have happened on a public cloud, which is not very easy for any central team to track, right? It's a very complicated stuff, especially when your cloud usage is very high. So this tool will look at all of that, look at their usage, and provide recommendations on where all can they optimize. And it will also let them, at the click of a button, if they want to optimize, you can bring that memory down or increase it or whatsoever, right? So yes, we help solve that problem of visibility, and of course optimize the spend, whether it is compute, storage, network, many different areas.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. We've covered so much ground in this discussion and spoken about a lot when it comes to cloud security, observability, multi-cloud, and of course, cost optimization. Thank you all for joining in and giving us